先进 Chapter 11 1. 子曰：先进于礼乐，野人也；后进于礼乐，君子也。如用之，则无从先进。 Confucius remarked, Men of the last generation, in matters of the arts and refinement, are considered to have been rude. Men of the present generation are, in those matters, considered polite. But in my practice I prefer men of the last generation. 2. 子曰：从我于臣，才者，皆不及门也。德行，颜渊、闵子骞、冉伯牛、仲弓；言语，宰我、子贡；政事，冉有、季路；文学，子游、子夏。Confucius in his old age remarked, Of all these who follow me and share hardships with me in my wanderings in former years, I do not now see one at my door. Distinguished for godliness and conduct there were Yan Yuan, Min Ziqian, Ran Bo Niu, and Zhong Gong. Distinguished as good speakers there were Zai Wo and Zi Gong, for administrative abilities, Ran You and Chang Yu, and for literary pursuits, Zi You and Zi Xia. 3. 子曰：回也非助我者也，于无言无所不说。 Confucius remarked of his disciple, the favorite Yan Hui. There was Hui, the disciple's familiar name. He never gave me any assistance at all. There was nothing in what I said to him with which he was not satisfied. 4. 子曰：孝哉闵子骞，人不坚于其父母昆弟之言。 Confucius remarked of another disciple, saying, He was indeed a good son. People found nothing in him different from what his parents said of him. 5. 南容三父白圭，孔子以其兄之子妻之。 A disciple of Confucius was fond of repeating the verse, A fleck on the stone may be ground away. A word misspoken will remain always. Confucius married his niece to him. 6. 季康子问弟子孰为好学？孔子对曰：有颜回者好学，不幸短命死矣。今也则亡。 A noble who was a minister in power in Confucius' native state asked him which one of his disciples he considered a man of real culture. Confucius answered, There was Yan Hui, he was a man of real culture. But unfortunately he died in the prime of his life. Now there is no one like him. 7. 颜渊死，颜路请子之车以为之国。子曰：才不才，亦各言其子也。礼也死，有官而无果，无不徒刑以为之国，以无从大夫之后，不可徒刑也。When the favorite Yan Hui died, his father begged that Confucius would sell his carriage to buy an altar case for the coffin in which to bury him. Confucius answered, Talented or without talents, a man's son will always be to him as no other man's son. When my own son died, he was buried in a simple coffin without the altar case. Now I cannot go on foot to buy a coffin case for your son. As I have the honor to sit in the state council of the country, I am not permitted to go on foot when I go out. 8. 颜渊死。子曰：一，天丧于，天丧于。When Confucius first heard the news of the death of his disciple, the favorite Yan Hui, he cried out in an outburst of grief, Oh, God has forsaken me. God has forsaken me. 9. 颜渊死，子哭之痛。从者曰：子痛矣。曰：有痛乎？非夫人之为痛而谁为？ When his disciple, the favorite Yan Hui, died, Confucius burst into a paroxysm of grief. Those around him said, Sir, you are grieving too exceedingly. He replied, But if I do not grieve exceedingly for him, for whom then should I grieve exceedingly? 10. 颜渊死，门人欲厚葬之。子曰：不可。门人厚葬之。 子曰：回也是与由父也，与不得是由子也。非我也，夫二三子也。When the favorite Yan Hui died, Confucius' other disciples proposed to give him a great funeral. But Confucius said, Do not do so for my sake. The disciples nevertheless gave him a grand funeral. Confucius then said to his disciples, Hui, the favorite disciple's familiar name, behaved to me as to a father, but I have not been able to treat him as son. It is not my fault. Ah, gentlemen, it is your fault. 11. 记录问世鬼神。子曰：未能视人，焉能视鬼？敢问死。曰：未知生，焉知死？ A disciple, the intrepid Chong Yu, inquired how one should behave towards the spirits of dead men. Confucius answered, We cannot as yet do our duties to living men. Why should we inquire about our duties to dead men? The disciple went on to inquire about death. Confucius answered, We do not as yet know about life. Why should we inquire about death? 12. 民子失策，隐隐如也；子路，行行如也。然由子贡，侃侃如也。子乐，若有也，不得其死然。On one occasion, several of his disciples were standing in attendance on Confucius. One was calm and self-possessed. The intrepid Chong Yu stood upright and soldier-like. 2 others looked frank and engaging. Confucius, looking on them, was pleased. He remarked, however, There is you, Chong Yu's name. There. I am afraid he will not die a natural death. Footnote 56. The prophecy eventually came true. The intrepid, chivalrous Chong Yu afterwards, in defending a town against the mob in a riot, was killed. Before he expired, when his helmet had been knocked to one side in the fight, he calmly straightened it, saying, A gentleman must die with his personal attire in proper order. 13. 鲁人为常府，民子谦曰：仍旧惯，如之何？何必改作？子曰：夫人不言，言必有终。A party in Confucius' native state proposed to build a new state house. A disciple of Confucius remarked, Why not keep the old building and modify it to suit the present circumstances? Why construct a new building? That man, said Confucius, referring to the disciple, seldom speaks. But when he does speak, he always hits the mark. 14. 子曰：由之色奚为余丘之门？门人不敬子路。子曰：有也生堂矣，未入于室也。Confucius, on one occasion, speaking in rebuke of his disciple, the intrepid Chong Yu, said, That man with his trumpet blowing should not be permitted to come to my house. After that, the other disciples began to look down upon Chong Yu. But Confucius said, That man, in his education, has entered the gate, but not the house. 15. 子贡问：师与商也孰贤？子曰：师也过，商也不。曰：然则师与与。子曰：过犹不及。A disciple of Confucius, referring to 2 other disciples, inquired which of the 2 was the better man. Confucius answered, One goes beyond the mark, the other does not come up to it. Then, replied the disciple, the first man is better than the best. No, answered Confucius, to go beyond the mark is just as bad as not to come up to it. 16. 既是富于周公，而求也为之聚敛而富益之。子曰：非吾徒也。小子民古而攻之，可也。The head of a powerful family of nobles in Confucius' native state had amassed immense wealth. A disciple of Confucius, who was in that nobleman's service, was very exacting in collecting imposts for him from the people on his estate, thus increasing his master's already great wealth. "He is no disciple of mine," exclaimed Confucius, referring to the disciple mentioned above, and speaking to his other disciples, proclaim it aloud, "My children," and assail him. 17. 柴也鱼，餐也卤，诗也辟，游也宴。 Confucius, speaking of his 4 disciples, remarked, "One was simple, another was dull, another was specious, and the last was coarse." 18. 子曰：“回也其恕乎？履空。次不受命，而获直焉，义则履众。” Confucius, speaking of his disciple, the favorite Yan Hui, and of another disciple, remarked, "There is Hui, Yan Hui's name. He is almost perfect as a man, yet he is often reduced to want. The other man does not even believe in religion, yet his possessions go on increasing. Nevertheless, the latter is often right in his judgment of things." 19. 子张问善人之道。子曰：“不见计，亦不入于事。” A disciple of Confucius inquired what constituted an honest man. "An honest man," answered Confucius, "does not ken, neither does he profess esotericism, that is, the secret of anyism." Footnote 57 literally does not go upon the beaten tracks, or what Carlyle calls formula. 20. 子曰：“伦笃是与？君子者乎？色庄者乎？” Confucius then went on to say, "Men now are honest in what they profess. Are they really good and wise men? Or are they serious only in appearance? That is what I should like to know." 21. 子路问：“文思行诸？”子曰：“有父兄在，如之何其文思行之？”然有问：“文思行诸？”子曰：“文思行之。”公西华曰：“有也问文思行诸？”子曰：“有父兄在。”求也问文思行诸？子曰：“文思行之。”赤也惑，敢问。子曰：“求也退，故进之；有也坚忍，故退之。” A disciple, the intrepid Changyu, asked if he might at once carry out into practice any truth which he had learned. "No," answered Confucius, "you have the wishes of your parents and of your old people at home to consult. How can you take upon yourself to carry at once into practice what you have learned?" Another disciple on another occasion asked the same question. "Yes," replied Confucius, "carry it out at once." Afterwards, another disciple ventured to inquire of Confucius why he gave 2 totally different answers to the same question. "That is because," answered Confucius, "the one man is too diffident. I therefore said that to encourage him. The other man, however, is too forward. Therefore I said that to pull him back." 22. 子谓于匡，颜渊后。子曰：“吾以女为死矣。”曰：“子在，回何敢死？” When on an occasion Confucius and his disciples on their travels were threatened with danger from the violent men of a certain place, his disciple, the favorite Yan Hui, was separated from the party. Afterwards, when the disciple rejoined him, Confucius said, "I was afraid you had been killed." "While you live," answered the disciple, "how should I dare to allow myself to be killed?" 23. 季子然问：“仲由、冉求可为大臣与？”子曰：“吾以子为义之问，曾有与求之问。所谓大臣者，以道事君，不可则止。今有与求也，可谓具臣矣。”曰：“然则从之者与？”子曰：“事父与君，亦不从也。” A member of a family of nobles who were in power in Confucius' native state, referring to 2 disciples of his who were in the service of that powerful family, inquired whether those 2 disciples could be considered statesmen. "Oh," replied Confucius, "I thought you had something extraordinary to ask my opinion about. You wish to have my opinion on this man, is that all you want? Men I call statesmen are those who will serve their master according to their sense of duty, who, however, when they find they cannot do that, consistently with their sense of duty, will resign. As to those 2 men you refer to, they may be considered as states functionaries, not statesmen. But the noble went on to ask, will these 2 men carry out anything they are called upon to do? An act of parricide or regicide they will not carry out, answered Confucius. 24. 子路使子高为废宰。子曰：贼夫人之子。子路曰：有名人焉，有社稷焉，何必读书，然后为学？子曰：是故恶夫佞者。A disciple of Confucius, the intrepid Cheng Yu, on one occasion got a very young man appointed chief magistrate of an important town. You are ruining a good man's son, said Confucius to him. Why, answered the disciple, he has a large population to deal with. He has questions of the interests of the country to decide upon. Why must one read books in order to educate himself? That, replied Confucius, is the reason why I hate men who are always ready with an argument. 25. 子路曾皙，然有公西华侍作。子曰：以无一日长乎尔，吾无已也。居则曰：不吾知也，如获之耳，则何以哉？子路率而对曰：千乘之国，涉乎大国之间，加之以师旅，因之以饥馑，有也为之，比及3年，可使有勇，且之方也。夫子审之，求而何如？对曰：方6、7十，如5、6十，求也为之，比及3年，可使足民。如其礼乐，以俟君子。赤而何如？对曰：非曰能之，愿学焉。宗庙之事，如会同、端章府，愿为小相焉。贬而何如？鼓瑟兮，铿而舍色而作。对曰：异乎三子者之传。子曰：何伤乎？亦可言其志也。曰：暮春者，春服既成，冠者5、6人，童子6、7人，与乎夷，风乎5余，咏而归。夫子喟然叹曰：吾与典也。三子者出，曾皙后。曾皙曰：夫三子者之言何如？子曰：亦各言其志也已矣。曰：夫子何甚有也？曰：为国以礼，其言不让，是故审之。为求则非邦也于？安见方6、7十如5、6十而非邦也者？为赤则非邦也于？宗庙会同，非诸侯而合？赤也为之小，孰能为之大？ On one occasion 5 of his disciples were sitting in attendance on Confucius. Confucius then said to them, I am only a little older than you, gentlemen. Do not mind that. Now living a private life, you all say that you are not known and appreciated by men in authority. But suppose you were known, tell me now, each of you, what would you be able to do? I could, answered the intrepid Cheng Yu at once, without hesitation. If I had the conduct of affairs in a state of even the first power which was hemmed in between 2 states of great power and which was embroiled in the midst of a war, and hence harassed by famine and distress, I could. If I had the conduct of affairs in such a state for 3 years, make the people brave and, moreover, know their duty. On bearing this, Confucius only smiled, and, turning to another disciple, said, And you, what do you say? I could, answered the disciple appealed to. If I had the conduct of the government of a state, say, of the 3rd or 4th power, I could in such a case, after 3 years, make the people live in plenty. As to education in higher things, I would leave that to the good and wise men who will come after me. Confucius then turned to another disciple and said, Now you, what do you any? I do not say, replied the disciple, that in what I am going to suppose I could do what I propose, only I would try to do it. Suppose then there were functions to be performed in any court, such as public receptions and general assemblies, dressed in an appropriate uniform, I think I could be the vice presiding officer. And now you, said Confucius to the last of the 4 disciples, what do you say? The disciple thus last appealed to then laid aside the harpsichord which he was thrumming, stood up and answered, what I have in my mind differs entirely from what those gentlemen have proposed. What harm is there in that? Replied Confucius, we are all only speaking out each his own mind. Then, answered the disciple, we will suppose now that we are in the latter days of spring, when we have changed all our winter clothing for fresh, new, light garments for the warmer weather. I would then propose that we take along with us 5 or 6 grown-up young friends and 6 or 7 still younger men. We will then bathe in that romantic river, after which we will go to the top of that ancient terrace to air and cool ourselves, and at last we will return, singing on our way as we loiter back to our homes. Ah, said Confucius then, with a sigh, I agree with him. Afterwards, when 3 of the above 4 disciples had left, the one who spoke the last word and who remained behind inquired of Confucius, saying, what do you think of what those 3 gentlemen said? They, of course, answered Confucius, only spoke out, each his own mind. But, asked the disciple, why did you smile at the first speaker? Oh, replied Confucius, to rule a country requires judgment and modesty. But what the first speaker said was not modest. Therefore I smiled at him. But the second speaker, the disciple went on to ask, did he not speak of the affairs of a nation? Why, answered Confucius, did you ever hear of a state of even the 3rd or 4th power that is not a nation? Well then, the disciple went on further to ask, the 3rd speaker, did he not also mean the affairs of a great nation in what he said? Where there are courts, public receptions, general assemblies, answered Confucius, where do you find such things except in the courts of the princes of the empire? The 3rd speaker modestly said he would be a vice presiding officer at such functions. If such a man as he is fit only to be a vice president, who would be fit to be the president?